Ladies and gentlemen, the 6 o'clock hour is upon us, and we have a board meeting, March 24th, 2025, and we need a roll call.
Karas.
Here.
Anastasio.
Here.
Doxy.
Here.
Venturini.
Here.
Washburn.
Here.
DeGroot.
He's here. Trustee Baccia is excused. The next item is a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so the next item is a presentation. We have the good fortune to be visited tonight by Speaker of Assembly Robin Voss, as well as Minority Leader Greta Neubauer. We had asked them a month, 6 weeks back or thereabouts, with the state budget going on. You guys want to come to the village and say a few words about it. And that's not something that the members of the legislature usually do, but in our case, we got kind of a unique situation because this was Robin's district for a couple of decades now, and with the recent redistricting and a fresh election, Minority Leader Neubauer is now representing Mount Pleasant. So as far as I see, you both kind of got some skin in the game because we're still Mount Pleasant, and although the lines have moved around, we haven't. We're still here. And we're very honored to have you guys give us a few thoughts on maybe the top 3 or 4 things that you think are pertinent to the upcoming budget. So the run of show, I think that we discussed was maybe 7-8 minutes or so. Give us your top hot 3 or 4 items, and then be prepared to take a few questions from the board. We might be interested in that, in some follow-up. So who wants to go first? Do you want to draw straws or arm wrestle or whatever? That's up to you.
Good evening, everybody. I do have a handout here, so I only brought 20 copies because normally there aren't this many people at an event, because I think I've spoken here pretty much every budget cycle. With that, thank you very much for having us here today. As you know, we are now operating under the gerrymander that was put into place by the Supreme Court. So even though I have represented Mount Pleasant for much of my political career, I now represent everything west of the interstate and about a third of Walworth County. So I get an awful lot of opportunities to meet new people, which is a good thing. But my district went from being about 60% or 57% Republican to now 65% Republican. So significantly more conservative and in a different way of looking at things, because I have to obviously focus on Walworth County in addition to Racine. So Governor Evers introduced his budget proposal about Valentine's Day. What normally happens is the legislature has nonpartisan staff go through and do an analysis where they look at every part of the budget, and then we begin listening sessions. We're doing those all throughout districts around Wisconsin. The Joint Finance Committee, half Senate, half Assembly, will be doing their listening sessions over the course of the next month as well, mostly during April. And they will then begin working on the budget come right around May 1st. That's the process. Our goal is to be done by the 4th of July so that whatever changes we make to the state budget continue. The good news about Wisconsin is that unlike the federal government, there can never be a shutdown, because if we never pass a budget again, we just operate under the old one forever. So that's not the goal, but we don't have the shutdown where they close down buildings and tell employees to not get paid. None of that happens in Wisconsin, luckily. So Governor Evers' budget is probably the most radical that he has introduced since he became governor 8 years ago. The things that are in there are pretty crazy. He starts with about a $4 billion budget surplus, and at the end he ends with a $4 billion deficit. He increases taxes by about $2.5 billion net, while increasing spending by 20%. So it's not really the budget that you would think. It's pretty much far out of the mainstream, in my opinion. It adds actually about 1,300 new positions to state government. It raises taxes, as I said, by about $4 billion. It actually makes a brand new income tax bracket that would be one of the highest in the country at about 10% of income. It repeals Act 10, which I know the Village of Mount Pleasant has used very effectively to help keep your property taxes down. That would be repealed. It actually also does a lot of other things for local governments. One of the other things that would affect the village, I think, in a negative way, is it would require family and medical leave to be provided to all employees, paid for entirely by the employer. So in other states that have done it, it's sometimes been half employee, half employer. It would say to all employees of Mount Pleasant, you would get 12 weeks of full paid time off, in addition to the regular vacation that you have, entirely funded by the taxpayers. And that would be for every local government and employer in the state of Wisconsin. Huge mandate. It repeals right to work. It actually also doubles the focus on energy tax. If you look at your utility bill, there's actually an amount on there to help pay for low-income folks to get free electricity and free natural gas. He actually doubles the tax, so all of us would pay twice as much on our utility bills every month as we do right now. It caps the manufacturing tax credit. So the reason that we have so many, we're actually the #1 state in the country for manufacturing jobs per capita. And the reason that we have that is something called the manufacturing tax credit, which is a huge incentive for new employers to come to the state. He actually caps that at a number that almost no one will be able to use it. He allows local governments, not quite at Mount Pleasant's level, but he would allow the city of Racine and other municipalities around the state to enact their own sales tax. In addition to creating regional taxing authorities for buses and transit. So pretty radical, and I could go on and on and on. There's so much in there. It's hard to look at it all. Now, the crazy thing is there are legitimate things that we need to focus on. When I do my listening sessions, and I have done them so far, but again, not in Mount Pleasant, people are focused on really two things. How do we deal with rising costs, which again, as state government, we have very little ability to have direct impacts on. The only thing we can really do is to make it worse. No new taxes, not more spending, not more programs. All of those are pretty negative. But one of the things that we know is that we have a housing crisis, that we need to figure out how to have more housing in southeastern Wisconsin especially. We know that we need about 1,500 houses in Racine, Walworth, and Kenosha County every year just to keep up with the current demand, and we are creating only about 600 houses a year, which is part of the reason that if you're a young family starting out trying to find a place to live, super challenging, and that's why we are seeing pretty dramatic increases in housing costs for all of us. The other thing that we need to make sure we are doing is doing a better job keeping our seniors in Wisconsin. We have done a very poor job in keeping senior citizens here. We actually export. It's one of our leading exports, unfortunately. Our successful seniors who go to, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, and they go there for 6 months and a day. And do you know when they return? When they get sick. So they usually leave in their 60s and come back in their 80s, and that has really put pressure on our budget. Now, one last thing, and then I'll sit down and let Greta have her turn, and we can take questions at the end if that's okay. Just kind of the big picture of the crisis that we are in addition to this demographic challenge. So the overall budget has, if we don't raise a single tax, just because we have got inflation and a growing economy, we'll have about $1.8 billion to spend on something. Okay, that could be raises for public employees. It could be property tax relief. It could be whatever your favorite thing would be. The challenge that we have is for the first time in Wisconsin history, Governor Evers, outside the normal budget process, gave a massive increase to Badger Care. So for people who are providers, that increase in Badger Care is going to take up almost all the new money that's coming in. So unfortunately, that means if we want to invest in property tax relief or in the university or in raises for public employees, we would have to either cut Medicaid or Badger Care, which is unlikely to happen, or we'd have to raise taxes, which is also unlikely to happen. So it's going to be a pretty big challenge for us between now and the 4th of July to balance it all out. But have faith, we will not allow your taxes to go up. We're not going to double that electricity tax. We're not going to have any of the bad things that happen. Our focus is really on trying to make sure we can have some meaningful tax relief to help you deal with inflation, at the same time funding our priorities. Good news for the village. You saw last year in our shared revenue agreement, a $90 million increase. Believe it or not, it was only going to be $45 million in the early estimates, but because inflation, one of the negative parts of inflation, but positive for the village, is that they basically doubled the amount of money we're going to give back to local units of government to use for police and fire services and property tax relief, because inflation has been so rampant under the last 4 years. It actually resulted in a pretty big increase that you'll see when you get your shared revenue payments. We won't have that exact number until sometime probably in early May or late April when they finish the entire analysis. But the good news is it's more than you would have gotten last time, especially after even the big increase that you got. So with that, happy to take questions at the end, but I'll allow Greta to go next.
Thank you, Robin. And batter up.
Thank you. Well, really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all this evening. Want to, of course, especially thank Village President Dave DeGroot, the rest of the board for having us. So I relatively newly represent the 66th Assembly District here in Mount Pleasant and really see our relationship as critically important in our work to serve our shared constituents. Earlier this afternoon, I sat down with a number of leaders in Racine County to talk about the things they'd like to see in our budget. I've hosted 2 public listening sessions so far and spoken with many trustees here. And so want to focus on a few of the things that I have heard about from many of you over the course of those conversations that we want to prioritize in this budget. So one of the biggest issue areas of concern for me and for many people in this community is education. We know that our kids are critically important to the success of our communities here. One of the high points of the governor's budget proposal for me is the $3.14 billion that he invests in K-12 schools. This is a significant investment, and we know that our kids need it. Here in Racine County, many of you might know, we're actually going to referendum on the April 1st ballot because the state just has not been keeping up its end of the bargain, and we're also worried about further cuts from the federal government that will put our schools in a really difficult position. Right now, Racine Unified is going to have to cut school safety staff, career training programs, and early literacy if this referendum doesn't pass. And class sizes for middle school and up will go up to 40 kids per class. So I would really like to see the state doing our part and investing our dollars where we need to invest them, which is our schools to help our kids succeed. That includes comprehensive mental health and behavioral health care, addressing lead contamination in our schools, providing breakfast to kids in our schools, which of course also saves families a lot of money. If you've got 2 kids, if you get a free school breakfast and lunch for those kids, it's going to save you about $1,800 a year on grocery costs. And then, of course, also looking at our child care industry. We know that we are facing a real cliff here. We already see folks spending a lot of money, often as much as it would cost to send someone to the UW system, to send their kid to a child care program. And that keeps people out of the workforce and puts a strain on families here in Racine County. So we are really hoping that we can find some common sense across the aisle solutions to our child care crisis. I want to talk a little bit about public safety, an important issue here to people in Mount Pleasant. This budget creates the Office of Violence Prevention, which is focused on a statewide approach to ensure that we are reducing crime, preventing violence, and with a specific focus on those victims who we see across our state. We also know that here in Racine County, we are having a difficult time with our court services. So in speaking with the county executive over recent weeks, I know that we have had real slowdowns because we are not able to fully fund what we need to do to keep our court moving through efficiently and ensure public safety. That's a top priority for Racine County and for the county executive, so it's a top priority for me. And then Robin spoke a bit about taxes. We have a little bit of a different perspective on this one, as we do on a few of these items. The governor's budget proposes tax cuts, in my opinion, only for the people who really can afford that and who need to pay their fair share to make sure that we can fund essential services in Wisconsin. This budget provides over $1.3 billion in property tax relief to the people of this state. When I'm out knocking on doors, I hear a lot about property taxes. We know that they're high. So I'd really like to see some property tax relief in this budget. It does hold the line And then, of course, also hopefully prevents people or slows down the rate, let's just say, of people going to referendum for their school districts because our schools are also well funded. 2/3 of districts across the state have gone to referendum last year and this year. Again, the state really needs to do its part. It also provides more than $1 billion in aid to local governments that agree to freeze property taxes. So the governor, again, hoping to not have those property taxes go up, but to make sure that local governments have the resources that you need in order to fund essential services. It also increases a number of other tax credits, including the individual income tax credit and the earned income tax credit. One of the areas that we did see some bipartisan work last year was on the issue of housing, so hoping that we'll have some more good news to report after the session there as well. We know that it's really difficult, especially for young folks, to buy their first home and for many people to stay in their homes. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to do some more bipartisan work there. And with that, I just want to reiterate that I am always really happy to hear directly from folks. If you have questions for us about specific items in this budget, we'll do our best to answer the board's questions tonight. But I really try to be accessible. If you all live in Mount Pleasant, then you are likely my constituents, and really happy to hear from you directly. If you want to give me a call, come to one of our listening sessions, join us up in Madison for an advocacy day. I am getting to know this new part of the district, and so always really happy to hear from you all about the priorities that you'd like to see us working on in Madison. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. Questions from the board? Rare opportunity to speak to your legislator.
I have one.
Go ahead.
I know that you mentioned education, which is an interest of mine particularly, but I'm sure of many people here. And from what I've read, it seems that the funding formula doesn't work. It hasn't kept up with the actual costs that districts are facing. And it seems that, I don't know, saying that, I don't know what Governor Evers is proposing to increase, if it's grants or what, to the districts, but it seems that, you know, a change to the funding formula might be a more permanent solution than, I'm not sure what he's proposing.
Sure, yeah, I'll share a little bit about that. So this budget, again, it's $3.15 billion in public schools, which is as the governor says, the most pro-kid budget that's ever been proposed in the state of Wisconsin. It's the largest direct investment in general school aids in 30 years. And that means that districts have spendable revenue to figure out what their greatest needs are. When I'm talking to Racine Unified, again, it's often, we want to invest in school safety staff. We want to expand the academies so kids are ready for their careers. We want to make sure that everyone's reading at grade level by 3rd grade, and we need more investment in early literacy. So there would be significant resources in this budget to give Racine Unified those tools. Again, if this referendum doesn't pass or we don't get more money in this state budget, class sizes in middle school and up going up to 40 kids per class. So significant staff cuts as well. The district here already cut, I believe it was about 150 positions going into this school year. They've trimmed quite a bit. So I really do hope we can make a real investment here. One of the big pieces that we've focused on is increasing the reimbursement rate for special education. So right now, to provide special education services, districts are only reimbursed at a rate of about, I believe, 32%. The state has long had a goal of reimbursing higher, 60%, often got bipartisan support in the past. So we're hoping to see more investment in reimbursing districts for special education so they're not having to pull from other budgets to provide those mandated services.
Thoughts from Robin?
Yeah, so as far as education, just so we're on the same page, if you take spending after Act 10 was actually put into place and fast forwarded to today, over the past 11 years, we have kept up with the rate of inflation. So the only reason it isn't keeping up with inflation is if you assume that school districts save nothing by having their employees pay a portion of their health insurance and their retirement, which I think all of us realize, of course, employees had to pay that, which meant taxpayers saved. In the budget last time around, Governor Evers issued a veto so that, let me back up. The way that schools are funded is by the number of kids in the classroom. So the more kids in a school district, the more funding they get. The less kids in a classroom, the less dollars they get. Racine Unified has been declining enrollment for really the past decade. So as more and more kids decide not to go to Racine Unified, or families have one child instead of 2, 3, or 4, the amount of dollars that's available at the school district has been declining. That's just the reality, and it's really about 3/4 of all districts in the state. I graduated from Burlington High School when I was in high school in 1986. That tells you how old I am. I graduated, we had 350 kids in our class. Right now they're at 240. So declining enrollment is happening everywhere. And the problem with a lot of people is they don't realize that when you have less kids, you have to figure out how to do things differently, not with the same number of people, not with the same number of square feet, but you have to do it differently. So what Governor Evers' budget does is kind of fund everything like it used to be when we had more kids in school, which means, yes, we will have more money for education, but the reality is it's going to be higher taxes. And in the budget that he actually passed a $400 per pupil increase for the next 400 years. A $300 per pupil increase for the next 400 years. So that's already automatically in the budget. So we're going to see a pretty big property tax increase if the referendum fails or passes. That's already baked into the system. So if I lived in Mount Pleasant, I would vote no on the referendum because there is a huge property tax increase that's already coming as a result of the governor's veto in the last time, in addition to all the money that's going to come from the state. So we have tried for 20 years to look at the school funding formula, and frankly, other states look at Wisconsin saying ours is one of the best, which is why even though when Democrats were in total control and Republicans were in total control, and even when we have divided government, we pretty much have kept the same system. The more kids you have in a school district, the more dollars you get. The less kids you have in a system, the less dollars you get. The wealthier your community, the less the state helps. The poorer the community, the more money comes in. So if you're in Racine Unified, people don't feel like it, but about 70% of the dollars that come in are not from your property tax. They're already from the state of Wisconsin or the federal government. So it's pretty hard to imagine higher than 70% and with the rest of the state paying the bill. So I can't really imagine that would happen, but we'll have to wait and see.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
So going back to the, Greta, you mentioned the violence prevention program. I don't know if you mentioned the number of dollars, but I was wondering what that is and what is the violent prevention program?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the Wisconsin Office of Violence Prevention is newly created by the governor in this budget. It's $3.5 million in the coming fiscal year, and then $8.5 million in 26 to 27, and that's for grants, largely to local entities that do work to reduce gun violence and prevent crime. So that's a wide variety of entities in local communities, right? In some places that looks different than others, but it's really focused on a few areas, which are reducing crime, preventing violence, and that includes gun violence, and then also victim services. And there's a pretty significant investment in this proposal. I believe it's $66 million that's coming from the Department of Justice as well, that is focused on sort of the broad ask from the criminal justice community that also includes, again, those victim services. Be happy to get you more details on that if you'd like.
And Robin, what is your take?
Think of things like midnight basketball, right? Giving big grants to like the Bryant Center or entities around the state. Paying for a gun buyback program where they pay everybody $500 for every old gun they bring in to turn in. I mean, that's some of the things that people have talked about when they've met with me to say that they would use the money. I think, you know what the best violence prevention program is? The police. So I would rather have the money just go directly to the police department to prevention that way, as opposed to giving it to a nonprofit to do things like midnight basketball, which I think are a big waste of money.
Just to follow up on Jim's question, the whole thing with violence prevention, isn't that a program that started in the city of Racine? And it's trying to get mainstreamed into the state now through the governor's budget?
Yeah, if you remember, the former city council president was appointed by Corey Mason to be the violence prevention coordinator in the city. They have done that in a few big urban areas around the state. Again, maybe Greta can point to some successes, but all I know is it seems like a big government boondoggle. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'll just note that I don't know that we need to do a full debate on this program. Again, happy to share more details of some of the kinds of things that this would fund, but do also just want to note that there is a significant investment in local government funding in the governor's proposal as well. So it's a holistic approach. It's looking at some more creative ways to try to get young people involved in the community, give them pathways that are not that are good pathways towards a career, sustainable life. But we also have a significant investment here in local government to ensure that public safety and law enforcement and all the other essential services that local government provides are funded as well.
Andrew?
So, Robin, this is more for you. I've had a lot of constituents in the area, especially when we're down at the music in the park, talk to me about the increase in property taxes. And what do we do to stop that? And one of the things that recently I've seen is actually and I think it's Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty that did this, where it's Act 10, that if Act 10 is repealed, what the increase is going to be. They have a calculator to show the property and all that. And I saw that and it was pretty scary. Have you seen it, and could you explain how they calculated that or figured that out?
Sure. So if you remember, under Act 10, the two biggest changes were employees had to pay for half of their retirement, all state employees, and they had to pay 10 to 12% of their health care. So that's still the way it is today. So if you are a state employee, you have very generous health care, and you're paying about 10% of the cost. So what the calculator says is that if Act 10 is repealed, you obviously are going to have those things potentially go by the wayside, and that's how you would figure out what the property tax increases are. The other thing that is challenging, though, and I would encourage you to take a look at it, that in Governor Evers' budget, he actually loosens the property tax limits for property taxes that we all pay. So you have the increase for schools, you would loosen the property taxes that we have set, or the property tax caps that all local governments have, and then they would have a brand new sales tax. So those are all the things that local governments would have different.
Anybody else? I've got a bunch of questions that I could ask, but in the interest
The audience have
of
any?
time and whatnot, pardon me?
If the audience has any, I'm happy to say.
Well, we didn't really agenda this for a public hearing, thing, and we do have a public hearing later regarding some business in front of the board. So I really don't want to go there, but if anybody does have a question for either Greta or Robin, they can bring it up with you in the foyer and have a conversation that way.
Thank you all so much for having us. Really appreciate the time. Please feel free to reach out if you have further thoughts you'd like to share. Thanks to the board.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is public comment, and I just want to distinguish that we've got two different kinds of public comment going on tonight. We've got public comment right now for anything that comes to mind, but then we're also having the public hearing regarding the rezone for the Brown Road, Green Bay Road development that's being planned. Most everybody that I see that signed up for public comment is going to speak to that. So if you want to hold your comments until that business item comes before us, we'll hear from you then. But does anybody else wish to speak publicly on anything? If so, now's your chance. Going once, going twice. So we'll close public comment, and we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
So there's a motion and a second on the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that motion is approved. So the next item under new business on community development would be the ordinance 2-2025 South Green Bay Road rezoning map amendment, ZMA 25-2. And we have a public hearing regarding that. So I just wanted to read just a quick paragraph regarding that. Following a brief discussion by the staff, I'll open up the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a public hearing form as you have, which is on the table near the entrance. Once recognized, speakers should come to the podium and identify themselves with their name and address. Please speak clearly into the microphone. Speakers must direct all discussions towards the board. I will not allow interchange between the members of the audience and the petitioner. We request that you not interfere with nor interject comments while another person has the floor. This is to ensure a respectful and orderly process. Please keep all comments on the particular item, before the board in at most 5 minutes. And then finally, to ensure a focused and productive hearing, please turn off or mute your cell phones or electronic devices so we don't have that distraction. So from here, I'd like to recognize our Development Director, Sam Schultz.
Mr. President, trustees, the applicant, Primestone Residential, applied to amend the zoning map for 34.28 acres between Old Green Bay Road and Royal Oaks Drive from AG1 to RL1. The application is concurrent with a preliminary plat application, PSP 25-1, that divides the parcel. The village board denied zoning map amendment application ZMA 24-9 on October 28th, 2024, because that application requested to rezone portions of the parcel to RM1, and this application is with a preliminary plat application that zones the property to only RL1. The village board can consider this application within a period of 1 year per section 90-530.90 successive applications. The Plan Commission recommends that the village board moves to approve Ordinance 2/2025. I'll also note that ordinance is per number 2 under the ordinance. The ordinance shall take effect upon the recording of a final plat for the subject parcel, substantially similar to the sanctuary at Pike River preliminary plat per Code of Ordinances section 74-3.5G. So this zoning is subject to a final plat. Because the village has a maximum lot size, they kind of have to run together. Other than that, I can get into the preliminary plat if you want, but the public hearing is technically only regarding the zoning. So I'll stop there and, at your direction, get into the plat if you want me to talk further.
I think we should deal with the first thing first and then get into the plat. Yeah, let's hold off with the zoning first.
Okay, sounds good.
Does Primestone wish to speak to this at all? If you want to just identify yourself at the podium, and I'll just preface this by saying that you've been in front of us a couple of times before. I was not at the first one. I think it was a year ago or so, and then I think you saw us again. Was it like July of last year?
October 28th.
Okay. And the residents had a lot of issues, and so this is, kind of the third whack at the cat here. And I think what's on everybody's mind is, what have you done to address the issues of the neighbors? And, is this, from the board's perspective, is this a good subdivision? So if you want to just fill us in on where you've gone since October.
I'd be happy to. My name's Tom McClayton. David Trendell is on a long-planned family vacation, so I'm his sugar substitute tonight. And we met with the Planning Commission on Wednesday. Since October 28th, we've had 2 meetings with the neighbors, most of which I recognize in the audience today. Probably over 50 people, different people in 2 different meetings, plus a handful of other individual meetings. We have essentially, based on our discussions with the neighborhood and planning people, and also with the board meetings that we went to, we've decided that we would like to go to just RL1 zoning, which is the low-density zoning. eliminate any RM1 or RM2 zoning that we had before. When we first got started with this project, way back when, we looked at, based on existing planning, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 270 to 275 units, which by comprehensive plan we could build. We're now at 159 units. The RL zoning, as you know and everybody else knows, I think, is either 1 or 2 units per lot. We have this is the site that everybody's familiar with. Based on our meeting with the Planning Commission, we reduced the total number of lots from 103 to 102, and I'll explain that a little later. Also, a total number of units from 160 to 159. This is the proposed zoning. As you can see, the 34 acres is all RL1. There is a lot on the far right hand there that goes off to Brown Street, which is a driveway easement. We have not included that in our lots, and as we'll discuss shortly, we've agreed to have the Providence Drive extend southward to Braun Road, as opposed to having a lot there, as well as the driveway easement will stay in place. That's a perpetual easement.
I think this one here.
This is the subdivision as platted, significantly different than what we had before. Before we had single-family lots, and we also then had 4, 6, and 8 attached unit buildings. We've eliminated all that, so the largest building we'll have is a 2-building or 2-unit duplex. And as you can see on the far left, this new plat allows us to accommodate the stormwater system that we have our engineers design. As many of you know, this particular site flows from the south to the north. On this particular slide, it goes from right to left. So it made more sense to have the stormwater ponds, there's 2 of them, and the whole system flow from right to left on that. This is an example. It's a rendering of a single-family home that we did on another one of our complexes. And then this is an idea of a duplex. The purpose of this slide is to indicate the quality that we intend to build. This will be institutional quality. Some people call it condo-like quality, but it'll be the highest standards of quality. Stormwater management, Nielsen, Mattson, and Barber, who unfortunately can't make it tonight, has designed a stormwater system that will handle the 34-acre development without any issues. I'm not an engineer, but that's what they told me. Homeowners, these are the common expenses for all the homeowners. We've had a lot of discussion at this on the Planning Commission, and I'd like to we didn't get a chance to change this slide, but I just want to point out that the bottom portion of that property management, that'll be third-party property management. And in addition, I've got a sentence or 2 that I'd like to add to that. Each unit owner will be responsible for its share of common expenses. All of the obligations for common expenses will be contained in a recorded agreement, probably a homeowner's agreement, that will run with the land. So we've agreed to that. It makes sense, and that's the way we had planned it originally, but just want to make sure that the board is aware that that's how we propose to handle it. Finally, over the past year or two, we've attempted to change the project so that it complies with all of the discussion that we've had with the neighbors, all the discussions we've had with the planners, the board, and the planning commission. We've attempted to approve the traffic safety. One of our proposals was to close the north and the south entrance to the project Providence Drive. You can see it there. There's a better one there. And so what we proposed to the Planning Commission was 3 entrances, one off Old Green Bay Road and the 2 stub entrances that are in existence off of Royal Oaks Drive. The Planning Commission suggested, and we agreed, that we would open up the south entrance to Braun, but because the neighbors and because it just makes more sense from a planning point of view, that we proposed, and I think the Planning Commission accepted, the closing of the north entrance to Providence. We were concerned about traffic flowing through our site from north to south to north, and through the neighborhood to the north of our site, which is Biscayne, Providence, and several other streets. A good portion of the people here live in that area, and we propose that we close that entrance and have 4 entrances. In dealing with the fire chief on this proposal, they said that 3 entrances would be fine. So what we're here to say is that we're willing to accept opening of which is a change in our proposal, opening of the South Providence Drive entrance. We're willing to do a deed restriction on the I know it's here. On the single-family housing lots along Braun Road and along Royal Oak Drive. That's a total of, I believe, 26, 27 lots, single-family lots. And that's what we plan on building, and that's what we will agree to build on those lots. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. We're going to go to public comment now. We may have some questions for you, so we reserve the right to recall you. So let's hear from the public now. And just as a reminder, you got 5 minutes. Can we hear from Ted Snigowski? And just give us your name and address for the record, Ted. Thank you.
I'm getting used to doing this.
Yes, sir.
My name is Ted Snigowski, 3627 Providence Drive. And most of this room has been here throughout this entire process. As you mentioned, it's going back, a couple years now. And to be honest with you, I have a lot more questions than I do answers or anything like that about this development. First off, I got to start with the planning side of this. This village holds planning meetings when most of the constituents can't get here during the day. And then it's just a rubber stamp. We argued this at the Planning Commission, but it seemed like they work a hell of a lot harder for the developer than for the constituents. We have not opposed development down there. We have opposed the scale and the numbers. There aren't duplexes in our neighborhood. We don't particularly want Racine brought into Mount Pleasant. We moved to Mount Pleasant for a reason. I look around the room and I see residents and friends that have been Mount Pleasant residents for 20-plus years. And when we come to the Planning Commission, we come to these meetings, it doesn't feel like you work for us. Microsoft now has a hold on much of their construction. Yeah, we want to charge forward with these projects for housing. We don't know what housing is going to look like in a year if Microsoft even comes through with everything. On top of that, these data centers don't employ a lot of people. So we're trying to cram a lot of housing into a small area that doesn't fit with the neighborhood. I applaud some of the traffic changes. We've had a neighbor and a good friend lived as long as we have in this area. Their house has been run into 3 times over the last 20 years. The exact same situation would be there if we put Providence Drive through. You'd T intersection right into one of our friends' homes. So I am vehemently opposed to moving forward at this time with this particular plan. I asked at the Planning Commission, again, got rubber stamped, that we take a pause. Let's look and see what Microsoft does. If they're another Foxconn and they don't employ the 13,000 people they said they were going to, why build these homes here in such a hurry that we can't have the input and let the neighbors be happy with the plan for the entire development? It doesn't fit. Like I said, I'm proud the direction we're going. I don't think we're there yet. And as mentioned before, this RL1, where now you can put 2 on single lot, again, we had some discussion about that at the planning meeting. It sure seems like the zoning changes to allow 2 residents per lot was changed kind of with nobody knowing in this group, at least none of the neighbors now that I've talked to. I use the term snuck through, my opinion. I'm asking at the very least, let's take a pause and see what happens with Microsoft and some of the other developments. These crappy home on grade with no basements go up really quick. So we don't need to push forward at the pace we continue to try to push forward. That's all I have.
Appreciate your thoughts. Can we hear from Mike Jaworski?
Mike Jaworski. I'm at 5951 Regency Hills in Mount Pleasant. And I really hate that I have to follow Mr. Snagowski. One of the things, I'm an engineer by education, but one of the things I love about technology and this whole AI thing is a person of average intelligence can get a wealth of information in such a short period of time. And that information and data that you can extract in literally an hour at lunch gets to go to the background and involvement of just about any human on this planet, board members and trustees included. I can't help but notice that over half the board or half the trustees here have involvement one way or the other in real estate. Not only does it concern me, but it raises suspicion. I am concerned that, as Mr. Snagowski pointed out, who are you representing? Who are you trying to support? It's very easy to understand that working with a real estate developer, there's something on the flip side, if not already in front, for you to gain. Not only is it disturbing to me, it's frustrating. I'm asking you to please put your professional jobs, what you do on the side to earn money, because I know what you guys do here, volunteering your time does not pay the bills. I realize you all have to have second jobs, other jobs, main jobs. But I'm asking you to separate that desire, that wish to improve your lives, at the expense of our lives. Speaker Voss had mentioned earlier tonight, he answered a question that I could not find on AI, so I applaud that. They're ahead of the AI information. My question to you was going to be, what is the number of units in southeast Wisconsin, or more importantly, Mount Pleasant, that we're looking to add? According to Speaker Voss, the goal is 1,500 a year, and we're only actualizing about 600. I don't know how broad that is. 3 counties. Oh, thank you. But let me give the audience as well as the board here what I have found, what Mount Pleasant just itself has done in the last 15 months. We have put up 2,400, to be exact, 2,415 units in the last 15 months within the border of Mount Pleasant. It's either added or under construction today. The 4 largest being the Seasons, Tivoli, Leo Living, which is new to me. I'm sorry if anybody lives there. I don't know where that is, and the Springs. They themselves account for 1,800 units. So if we're only looking for 1,500 per year, we've already exceeded that goal by 50%. Last but not least, I just want to make sure that everybody here understands, I also am not opposed to the addition or the use of that land for housing. But I would like it to emulate and pretty much duplicate what we have already there. As Mr. Snigowski had pointed out, there are no duplexes probably within a good mile. You have to go across Green Bay Road to get to places that start with a duplex. And to me, that's great land/property. Right up along, Green Bay Road, easy access, but inside a community, it should stay a community. Thank you.
Well, regarding the numbers, I might have Mr. Schultz address that, but in due time. Can we hear from Ann Zog?
Hi, everyone. You've seen me before. I promised I wouldn't be back, but yet here I am. So thank you, Mike, and thank you, Ted, for your comments. We all agreed with many of the things you said. I want to start with a moment of gratitude. We've had many discussions here in the village board meetings, in the planning commission, and I appreciate being listened to. I wish we had done more of that on the front end, but at least we're doing it now, so thank you for that. I want to thank Tom and the developer, and I'm not sucking up, but they weren't listening to us. You encouraged them to do so, and they have made an effort for those of us that met with them at the restaurant over the last few months, and they are listening. And we made progress, and I'm not going to get into all the details. For those of you that have the meeting packet I sent out, if you're on my email list, I can't get it on Facebook, I'm sorry. All the conditions they have had up on the screen. Sam might want to show that again, but that's proof of the progress we've made, and I think that's worth something. It's all of us working together, right, as neighbors and working with the village and the developer, so thank you to everyone for doing that. I don't want to be controversial, but I know the development is going to happen, and I am agreeable to it happening. I think we've made enough progress in that direction. I've lived there with Mark, my husband, and our kids were raised there 23 years. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but we are in a better place, and so I'm good with that. I hope we can influence the aesthetics. I know, Nancy, this gets a bee under your bonnet, but we don't want army barracks like we see in Summers or on I-94 in Oak Creek. I think we all agree with that, so.
Oh, I agree with that completely.
It's hideous. Like, let's be honest about that. But the thing that I'm still really ticked off about, and I hope you guys take notes, I see some of you are, is the traffic and the safety. The Peltier family house has been hit 3 times. Thank God it wasn't a child that rides their bike on that street. I walk that street almost every day. I wave at most of you, don't I? You're not doing a good enough job. The flippant response I got from the director of DPW is not acceptable. I have the email. I'm happy to share it with you after. I've invited you to come walk my neighborhood. I will make you coffee. I will serve you cookies. You need to see what we all deal with when we are living and supporting our neighborhood, and it's not safe enough, and we can do better. And so for those of you that have taken my calls, thank you. You have listened. Mr. Doxey and Nancy have given me hours, and I appreciate that, but that's not a solution. And so here's what I'd like to suggest. As part of the conditions, you all have required the developer to do a traffic impact analysis study, something like that. I want you to share it with us. I don't want that to be in a vacuum. I think everyone in this room has a right to know, what does it say? We might be wrong, and I think we're adult enough to admit that. I want to see the results, and then I want a listening session with whoever legally can listen to us. I know you all have some of those fancy rules, but we have a right to have a voice in how you make our neighborhood safer. And I don't want the Department of Public Works to send me a form email to tell me why they can't employ traffic calming measures. Because in Sam and Robin's excellent presentation last week, that was one of the solutions. So the left hand and the right hand are not talking to each other, because one says you can do that and the other tells me you can't. The kids that ride their bikes on those streets, someone's gonna get hurt or killed. Let's not wait until that happens. So that's the only thing I would hesitate in saying approving this, is you have not met my requirements for that. And I think that's it. So thank you again for listening. I appreciate it.
Appreciate your thoughts. Sam, you don't have a problem sharing the traffic study or whatever comes out that way?
No, I'll caveat that those studies can take a bit, so we won't have one, next week. Likely, if you vote to approve this plan with this condition, the developer does move forward with that traffic impact analysis, I would guess a couple months, but we'll make sure to keep you all and the neighborhood through, the common emails that we get apprised of the status of that traffic impact analysis. At a minimum, it would be required to be submitted with the final plat application, which would come back before the Plan Commission and Village Board. So, we'll make sure to be transparent before that, but it will be included in those public meeting packets that go out at the end as well.
Okay, Mr. Schultz is saying be patient. You'll. Can we hear from Ken Roach?
Hi, I'm Ken Roach. I live at 6027 Biscayne Ave. I wanted to, first of all, thank the board for their involvement so far. You've listened to us complain for 2 meetings about how we didn't like what was being proposed. And I'd like to thank the developer for listening to us when we said we didn't like what was being proposed. They worked quite hard on it. They put a lot of changes into it. I think that the plan as they presented tonight and as has been shown is a vast improvement over what we had initially. So much so that if they can put the provisions in there for single-family units around the perimeter, as has been talked about, I would actually be willing to support the development. Yes, I know duplexes are a bit of a change from what we have in the area, but things move forward. I think that the plan as it's presented is actually pretty reasonable given where we are in today's environment. So I just wanted to say I support the plan as it, or would be supported if it has the amendments for the single-family homes around the exterior. Just wanted to put my voice out there and say I support it. That's all.
Thank you. Jennifer, and I don't want to screw up your name. Is it Morin or Maria?
My name is Jennifer Morin. I'm at 6010 Braun Road, Mount Pleasant. The 2 things I wanted to mention was traffic. I mentioned at a previous meeting that I live on Braun, and I've been rear-ended coming into my driveway, or my husband was rear-ended coming into his driveway. And when I discussed with, I don't know, planning or whatever, it became clear to me that you closing access to the Braun Road was not going to happen. But incidentally, I also feel like my concern was kind of a kick the can down the road kind of thing, where, oh, well, we'll deal with that later. Well, we ought to deal with these things now, because they can be resolved now with the traffic calming. And so my concern is, so we do a traffic study. What's the mechanism for actually making change that's positive for the community? And traffic through that neighborhood is bad. And it ought not to be, because we have a community, and as we build our community, we have children. We want our children out. We want to be able to walk our dogs, those kinds of things, safely. And I'd like to be able to get into my neighborhood or in my driveway without continually being at risk of being hit. There is no doubt in my mind that developing with the density that they're going to develop is going to greatly increase traffic. But if you add some calming features, it should help who chooses to come in and out off of Braun. That should help spread that out a bit and mitigate that a little bit. In addition, for the people that are accessing and egressing in other parts of the community. So that really needs to be that needs to have some deep attention to it, please. And I'm asking you all to consider that as well. The other thing that I saw was, when we talk, I guess it's a question, and you don't have to answer it, I suppose, but deed restrictions for single-family homes, meaning that those lots are only allocated for single-family homes, or that are they rented, are they bought and sold? I mean, what are we talking about here? And then I had one other point. I also wanted to say that when I called and talked to a member of the board, and I don't remember who it was, apologies, I was kind of talked down to with regard to thinking that we couldn't support single-family homes in the whole community because of, well, this isn't Oak Creek, I think was what the comment was, or this isn't a more wealthy community was the idea. And I think baloney, because there's a lot of people in our community that are looking for entry-level single-family homes that would like to be able to get on the ground level. And this idea that we must push forward into multi-units as a path forward, I think it's malarkey. I think that our economic situations are going to ebb and flow as they have historically, and we ought not to be so narrowly focused into these things. And I don't appreciate this idea that the zoning changes have now allotted for a low density to have 2 units on a lot. That's a new trend. And I don't think it does any benefit for the community. I don't think that it's necessary, and I don't appreciate that being something that, well, either you accept this as part of a development or you accept something worse, like it's like the lesser of the evils. With that being said, I do notice that there has been some adjustments. I would look forward to seeing a few more adjustments made before this thing is finalized. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your service. Thank you.
Can we hear from Connie Ziccarelli? We'll give you the last word.
Connie Ziccarelli, 3840 Royal Oaks Drive. If we want to bring up that map, I am the east perimeter of this property. So Mike, Ed, Ann, Ken, and Jen, you guys are a hard act to follow. But I do want to come in front of you guys again, in front of the board again, and just say, I'm still not ready. I have lived in this neighborhood since 2001. There wasn't even a road. Royal Oaks Drive was dirt. And it was a beautiful farm community behind us. And although times will change and we ebb and flow and we progress, one of the charms of Mount Pleasant was its ruralness. We've got factories coming in, we've got Foxconn, we've got Microsoft, we've got it all happening, which is great. But right now, we don't even have seasons filled up with renters yet, and they're building like crazy. We've got the Pike new subdivision just a little bit south of Seasons. They're not even sold out yet. So the fact that we have to cram a development into this landlocked piece of beautiful property, of which I've asked each one of you, each time I've come up, to come join us, come walk our neighborhood, and come see this beautiful piece of land. I haven't had anybody take me up on it yet, but invite's still open. I just feel that this will be a negative impact on our neighborhood. It will not align with what we have, with what we bought, and what we're proud of. It will not align with the wetlands that are beautiful right now. Birds, frogs at night, they have not taken into consideration, or at least has not told me, what is going to happen with that side of the property, other than it's going to be a retention pond. So right now, I still feel, I know it's going to happen, progress is going to happen, but this progress will not match. And I hope that you continue to have them perfect the idea. We do the traffic study, and it's no joke. Her house has been run into 3 times since I've lived there. Right now, the fire department can't even get to my street unless they go through unless they go through Regency Hill. So fire hasn't been a problem since 2001. So why are we rushing to put roads and cram in duplexes and 2 plot houses per every one of the houses that line Royal Oaks and Burr Oak? It does not match. So let's continue to work on this together and get something that we can all walk around and be proud of. I have told my neighbors, and I'll say it to you, if you approve this, the first bulldozer that goes on that land, I will be out there and be bawling my eyes out, because I know we did not do it right. So please, take some time and let's continue to massage this. Thank you.
Appreciate your thoughts. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak and hasn't signed up yet? Need to know that? No? Okay, in that case, we can close the public hearing. And then move on to the ordinance. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 20-2025 South Green Bay Road zoning map amendment ZMA-25-2 as presented.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. So this would be the time for the board to weigh in. We've heard a presentation. We've heard concerns from the neighbors. If anybody wanted to bring the developer back up for a question, we could do that. First off, though, if I could just jump in and ask Sam, there was some discussion in public comment about the numbers of what is supposed to be built per year in terms of housing units. Where are we at in that? Where did the study start with? What was the original number that we had to reach? Where are we along the way on that? That's 100 questions, but I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I'll do my best to answer your question. I will caveat it with the village does an annual housing affordability analysis. That is mandated by state statute, and we try to take it a step further and compare the amount of housing that's been added to the village's comprehensive plan, which by state statute has to have a housing element to it. And so we look at long-term projections. Right now, we're looking at a 2050 projection for it. So going back to when the village originally adopted its comprehensive plan, the first version of it in 2010, the village has not built enough owner-occupied housing except in 3 years, and has not built enough renter-occupied housing to keep up with demand in 2 years. Every year we look at the census-reported figures for vacancy rates. In last year's data, the homeowner vacancy rate was 1.4%, and the rental vacancy rate was 1.6%. Typically, we use about 5% as a healthy figure. And I think everyone anecdotally, we mentioned this in the housing report, can see that housing is tight. Our current projections to meet both our comprehensive plan and our long-term housing goals that are identified in that plan is we'd need about 3,800 additional owner-occupied units and about 3,700 renter-occupied units to keep up with demand. That's in the long run. So every year, based on what's added and what hasn't been added, we're about 150-ish units, 170 units behind where we should be, and that we'd need to add every year from here on out. That waxes and wanes as more housing is added, more is absorbed over time. That's why we look at those vacancy rates to make sure that we're not, overheating the housing market and the amount that, the village participates in. But as of now, those vacancy rates remain low, and so that's kind of where we're at.
So it's not a matter of what has been built, it's a matter of still where we're projecting needs to be built on a year-by-year basis.
Yeah, we try to take a long-term view as, the state requires through the housing affordability analysis and the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, down the end.
So I took a position on the board because not as a developer or any type of landowner, I own a house. But I did it because I wanted to help the people and listen to them. I had a few calls that came in and I listened to what they had talked about. Listened to 6 people, 7 people that just talked. Every individual that went up there said, yes, we understand something's gonna happen. We know it's eventually gonna be something. The biggest thing is we need to make sure that it's the right thing that gets developed. I heard, hey, we've been here two times, 3 times. How many times do we have to come back and do this? And what I think, and it's interesting because I looked at it and said, maybe, do we not approve this and let it wait? But yet now, it kind of sounds like everybody's in the agreement and understanding that we do need to create something. Something's gonna go there, it's gonna be a residential. The battle is what is gonna go there, and that's the discussion. Everybody that's talked wasn't about the zoning necessarily, more so than what is gonna be there. So, I mean, looking at it, it sounds like we really, in my thought, need to move forward with the zoning so that we can get past that portion and now focus on what goes there. Because, again, do you want to come back with, we know that something's gonna be, we know, and I get it, it's painful, but to me, I think this is a zoning ordinance, not the discussion on what's gonna end up there. So, yes, you need to fight and you need to figure out, hey, what needs to go there? But I just wanna let you know, I did hear about hey, this board's about, hey, we're trying to do this because we want to, I will be honest, I listen, I like to hear what people say, and I did, and again, it sounds like we're in a situation where it needs to happen so we can move to that next step.
Yeah, I would just like to echo what Trustee Karas just said. This is a development that's going to happen at some point. Everybody talked about that tonight, and this is simply about the zoning of this property. When somebody owns a property and they want to do a development, We don't have the power to stop that and say, let's put it on hold. We can't do that. All right, this is all about the proper zoning for that property, and then we'll next go to the next step. So we're here to listen. I think you've seen that, and some of you have called me as well, and I've listened. So it's important that this tonight is simply to zone it really properly, and it's probably the correct zoning for that land.
Sam, quick question. The RL1 is the lowest density zoning we have for the village, right?
There's one lower that's a state lot, but the minimum lot size for that is an acre. So that's really meant to be like
Okay.
very large house on very
Right.
large lot.
So I think that the zoning has moved in the right direction, what everyone wants to see. But I do not think that the development that we see still is conducive to the neighborhood. I think we're looking more for single-family homes. I hear, we don't have enough high density in the area. It's only high density is what can be built now because that's what people can afford. Yet, right behind my house, there's Hood's Creek, and they're still building single-family homes. Small lots, but nice single-family homes. And so, the last 2 times we declined this, we didn't like the look of the development, and we declined it because of the zoning, but I think also because of the look. So I would rather have us say no to this and come back with a better development, so we cut it off right here, than let this go through, and then we have to continue the fight with, as this is, the developers then again come in with another idea and another idea. I'd say I'd like to just cut this off at here tonight. Thank you. Now, this is something funny, because I did receive a phone call today, and it was a point that was made, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, wow. We have, our population's getting older, and we're gonna soon have a lot of baby boomers heading to nursing homes and such like that. Are we gonna build a lot of this, and then what are people gonna be doing in 15, 20 years when the millennials and the Gen Zers are looking for single-family homes, and baby boomers are going to nursing homes, and us Gen Xers, we're probably gonna retire early because we had a hard childhood. So, I don't know that we need all this high density. We got 2 more developments going up out on C by the church. So I don't know that we need all that much more. I think that give the developers another, kick of the cat, but I think that we just hold off on this for now. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. President. We obviously had, for many of you that were at the Plan Commission meeting, that was over a 3-hour meeting, and a lot of that discussion was on the preliminary plat. I think that
Which we still haven't even gotten to.
which is not which is not the motion that was made. The reality is, in the Village of Mount Pleasant, the zoning plan, the comprehensive zoning plan, and I really should say the zoning code that we are working with today was approved many, many years ago. And Sam, if you want to remind us of the date. To sit in the audience and tell us that nobody in town knew about it, that there was no notice of the zoning code being rewritten, and no ability to input would be absolutely incorrect. Under local code and ordinances as well as state statutes, we know that we had open houses, we had a number of different ways that people could comment on the zoning. And so once again, when everybody's in this situation, it was something that was sprung on them. And I would hazard a guess to say that is not the case. Number 2, the ability for when a property is offered for sale, whether it be a small piece or a large piece, we as a board don't have the ability to legislate whether the new owner or developer offers it for rent or for sale. And I wish that we did. I truly wish that we did. Mr. Jaworski, you're looking at me directly. You know my background. You've obviously looked it up. I'm keenly aware and have been very actively involved in the development of mixed-use, single-family, and commercial properties in the Racine County, Kenosha County, Walworth County, Washington County, and Ozaukee County area for the past 30 years. So what I do understand about real estate is housing trends, housing studies, and planning. So the bottom line is, when I make that statement, is the fact that I would love to see this a for sale project. And I have tried to encourage the developer to look at it that way, because I think they have an amazing opportunity there. But it appears from this developer that they want to hold this in portfolio somehow. They haven't really been they haven't made a lot of verbal commitments to what they're doing, right? We think they're renting it. Some of it they're gonna commit to single family only, 1 unit per lot. But it's our understanding that the intention is that they're going to have this as a for sale project. And I wish that there was something I could do. And I have tried during this process to hold them at least to a certain standard. But we cannot legislate what they do with it. A property owner has their property available for sale, and I think now that we've looked at it, we have it being zoned. Right now, the application before us is for the lowest density single family, other than the real estate, the estate zoning requiring 1 acre or more. It's the lowest zoning, density zoning we have in the community to offer. I think it is appropriate. I would like for Sam, there was a comment made, I believe, by Mrs. Zuccarelli, about there being 2 houses on a lot. And Sam, I think that's a little confusing still to some people. Can you go into more detail about what is allowed on 1 lot?
Sure. That's correct. Let me just pull up the section of the ordinance. Hold on. So generally in RL1, low-density residential 1 district, under section 90-110.40 allowed building types, the RL district allows detached houses, which is your standard single-family, 1 house on a lot, a 2-unit house. So that is essentially, think like vertically stacked duplex, 2 units in the same structure, or a twin house, think kind of side by side. So it's still 1 per lot. That twin house just shares a lot line between the 2 units, 1 per side. Hopefully
Kind
that
of
makes
like
sense.
we've seen them in condominiums, and we have other duplexes here in the community being built right now that are duplexes, but they're condominiums. They're for sale, but they are attached by a common wall. Okay, thank you. So there won't be like 2 houses built on 1 lot, if that makes sense.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. 2 families,
Right.
but the impression I got is people were envisioning it a little differently, based on another comment, not yours. I just wanted to clarify that, because that did come up at Plan Commission as well. So therefore, I think, for this part of the discussion, I think the zoning's appropriate. I don't think it can get any better, any different. We're not gonna go back to the RM, that's for darn sure. So unless we want, quite a bit more housing on that property. I think there is a need in our community for a 2-unit style of house, and I think that when we get into the plat, we can have a further discussion about that. Thank you.
No, I agree that that this is appropriate zoning.
Sam, how much buildable acreage is there if you take out the wetlands?
That's a tough question to answer. It kind of depends on how you lay it out in terms of the wetlands themselves to the north.
Well, just take a stab at it.
About 25 acres.
Okay. So if we were talking estate zoning, which is the lowest level, biggest lots, 1 acre minimum, to put roads and whatnot in, you're talking at most maybe 20 houses, 18, 20 houses.
Yeah, there's a little bit of flexibility there. You could probably go a bit more depending on how you laid it out, but it'd be no more than,
Well,
I'd say 50 at most.
Right.
but-
Well, I bring that up only because, that's a scenario that the dog just won't hunt on, because the cost of putting in the infrastructure, the roads, the sewer, the water and whatnot would be so high that the lot price, would be ridiculously out there. And that's going to be something that would be of no interest to the developer. The developer, at some point in time, has to make money. And the way the developer makes money is by having a certain density wherein his project can pencil out. Because the developer is not going to be nonprofit on purpose. And frankly, I would want to encourage the developer to be able to make some money so that the vision of the developer can actually come true, and there's not going to be 100 corners getting cut. So it's in everybody's best interest that the developer has a fighting chance of making a buck on the project. The residents, you gathered here in these chambers, have said time and again, how do we take density out of it? I think that the developer, has listened, and he's taken as much density out of it, whereas he could still make a buck in proposing the project. So for that reason, I think that the zoning at RL1 is the best we can do, and is certainly an improvement over what was originally proposed. It's the whole thing will be RL1, in as much as there's going to be some twin dominium type duplexes with a shared wall. And there still is traffic studies yet to be done, answers to some of your questions pending. But again, regarding the traffic study, you can't expect planning to make promises that they can't keep. That'll all get borne out in the study. Just as a reminder, again, what we're looking at in this motion is the zoning. And the best and highest use of the zoning, given everybody's concern, is RL1. And that's what's proposed to us, and that's what we're going to vote on in just another minute. From there, then we'll take on the next item, which is the preliminary plat. And I would emphasize that it is preliminary. It's still a work in process. So regarding, excuse me?
Yeah, I had to, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wasn't pushing myself. I wasn't pushing to go, and I don't think anybody here really thinks we need to go to the estate lot size. But I think it's a developer, not the developer, could make money on single-family home lots, which would be conducive to the neighborhood that's been there for 30-plus years.
Well, I'd like to remind you that this is the developer that has
Yeah.
the offer on the property and is coming to us with a zoning request and a preliminary plat.
If I could just make one more comment.
Sure.
So I live over just out of the Jamestown area, over on Rosemary Lane. And over in Jamestown, they have homes, and then they have side-by-side condominiums. Right around the corner, coming out over by, if you go towards Roma Lodge, same thing, condominiums, not only side-by-side, but full-fledged condominiums. I have talked to the police chief about traffic situations. I had to yell at somebody today who went speeding by as I was speaking with somebody in the road. And we're always trying to work on that. But the bottom line is that it's a wonderful neighborhood. We walk, my wife and I walk my grandchildren who happen to live across the street from me. I'm a lucky guy. And so we make it hasn't diminished the value of that neighborhood. And that's what I want you to, I've been on this side before, where you don't want that progress to happen because you have what you love and you think it's gonna be that way forever. But unfortunately, there is developments and there is progress. And so that's why we're here today. And I think the developer has made some changes to accommodate what you're looking for your neighborhood. And I think it's really for that piece of property, again, going back, this zoning is appropriate.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention for the benefit of the board that Trustee Vacha, Ram, called me a couple of days ago, and he was at the 3.5-hour Plan Commission meeting, where again, this was very thoroughly vetted out. He said that he was satisfied with where that meeting ended up, and would be here, if he were here tonight, he would be voting to support it. So with that, how about a roll call vote on the motion that's in front of us for the rezone?
Karas. Anastasio.
Aye.
Doxy.
Nay.
Venturini.
Aye.
Washburn.
Aye.
DeGroot.
Aye, motion carries. So let's move on to the second item of this, which has been referred to in our previous discussion, but this would be the preliminary plat, PSP 25-1. Need a motion?
Oh, I thought we were gonna have Sam present it. I'm gonna make a motion to approve the Sanctuary Pike River preliminary plat PSP-25-1 with, as presented with comments and with the conditions attached.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. So this is phase 2. We've done the rezone, and now again, we're bringing up the preliminary plat, which is presented to us as a first swing as far as what the developer has in mind. He has to have something in front of us to get his discussion going to where it is of interest to our planners to review and move forward on. So, any thoughts from the board on that?
I'll be happy to start the discussion, Mr. President. So this preliminary plat has come a long way, as a lot of you alluded to. It has been because the developer has listened to you. And in some cases, he's done some things that, in my opinion, were not so good for planning in the future, but they were because he listened to you. Having had some experience in working with traffic impact studies and traffic impacts and subdivisions and the way they calculate them, I think that some of the fears over traffic and safety are going to be, they'll be highlighted in the TIA. Basically, they're going to come out and they're going to count cars. They're going to put strips down in front of, on Brown Road, Old Green Bay Road, and probably several of the other recommended areas, Lockwood, so that they can count where the cars are going. They will make recommendations based on, they'll use the Department of Transportation's formulas for counting those cars. In residential subdivisions, a residential car count for a single home is 2.5 cars per day, which I know sounds ridiculously low, but that is the number the DOT uses for car trips per household per day when they're calculating and counting cars. In a commercial development, it would be much higher than that. In a subdivision where you had 20 units to the acre, it would be higher than that. But in a subdivision zone like this one, the ones that I have seen, what I like about the TIAs and what it does tell you is that we tend to think as a people that if we cut off accesses, then it's going to cut off the amount of traffic that's going to go by our houses. And the reality is that the more access we can open up, the more that traffic gets diffused. And I think if it was Ann that said that, or somebody in one of the people that spoke mentioned that. And I've seen that happen. I don't see the traffic on Lockwood Drive changing dramatically with this subdivision. And seeing as how the Planning Commission has agreed, at least through this plat, to cut off that northern access through Providence Drive, that's really gonna make an impact, and that again will keep the traffic on Lockwood and Old Green Bay Road. Not Lockwood, I'm sorry, I don't have the plat in front of me, the road that runs, I apologize.
Sheridan?
Huh?
Sheridan?
No, not Sheridan. The one that Little Prairie goes over to. Sorry, I thought I was, Hillside and Little Prairie go east over to that. Sorry, I called it the wrong name, I apologize. What's the name of that street? It's the street that runs north and south on the east side of the property. Sorry, Royal Oaks, thank you. I think what this traffic does bring up to me, and I bring this as a note to the board, and I've mentioned this before, and I'd like to see this put on maybe a cow agenda. One of the things that we haven't really taken into account is the impact of Woodman's to the community, and the residents have mentioned that a million times. Woodman's is in the city of Racine. It daylights onto Highway 11, and that's a state trunk highway. And I don't know what studies have been done by the city of Racine for traffic. I don't know what counts they're using for that traffic, or how the DOT has looked at Highway 11 in terms of their long-range planning, because it's not only Woodman's, but it's the housing that's gonna be over at Woodman's. So again, Mr. President, and to our attorney, Chris Smith, I think we need to figure out, we need to know what's gonna happen there. Obviously, this neighborhood is gonna have an impact, and I think as you all have mentioned, you currently have cut-through traffic just going up to the mall as it is. Now, I will tell you, in view of that, I used to drive that cut-through myself, and I don't do it anymore. Out of respect to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, I never realized really what a burden that was to a local neighborhood. I thought I was just getting where I needed to go. But note to the board and to Sam Schultz and to Chris, we need to talk about Woodman's and the impact to our community. The deed restrictions, I'd like to see those on the preliminary plat, stating what lots will be 1 unit per lot. I think that's very important. The outlot ownership, they've alluded to the documents that they provided us at Plan Commission, and as the developer stated, they haven't had time to get those documents corrected between last Wednesday and today, but I'd really like to see those documents. The other concern I have on the plat itself, and this is the one area where, in my mind, I'm not sure that we're ready to approve it. It's in combination with the traffic impact study, but also the lots on the northeast corner on the developer's map, he shows the 2 ponds, and we cut off the access up to Providence. However, there are 2 abutting property owners now that have been cut off because under the original neighborhood plan, they were gonna have road frontage. And now they have odd lots of 1.6 acres, and another one is, I think, 1.2 acres, that are kind of up against the ponds and have no way to further subdivide themselves. If you talk to them today, they probably don't want to subdivide themselves, but at some point, they're gonna be outcasts in that neighborhood. And because they will not have road frontage, Metzger's will front onto Biscayne and be a long, narrow lot in perpetuity, and the Baumas would come in off of Old Green Bay Road, and they have a very nice little flag-shaped lot that could be further divided, but won't have any public road frontage except Old Green Bay Road. So that's a problem to me, because intrinsically, in thinking about neighborhood planning, which I have spent a lot of time on in my career, that's a little bit of a problem. So the question I pose to the board is, I think that the developers come a long way. I personally don't have a problem with certain 2 units on there. Again, I can't stop them being for sale or for rent. But if the traffic impact analysis comes back and tells us there should be something different about the roadways, that's gonna be a major change to the plat. A preliminary plat is a plat that, while it is called preliminary, it is a document that has teeth within state statutes. And it is a document that the final plat should be in substantial conformance to. So the final plat, there could be 3 final plats on this site, because we haven't talked to the developer about phasing. Are they gonna go in and build all of these at one time, put in all that roadway at one time? You typically don't see our developers doing that these days. So as they come in phases, they're gonna come in final plats, final plats, final plats. So, with the motion that I made being on the floor, I really think that it's a little premature. I think that I'd love to see the impact of the traffic impact analysis to the preliminary plat before we just arbitrarily move it forward to final plat. It does take a couple of months for those to be done, no doubt, but that information is very important to us, I think. Again, they've made a lot of concessions that the Plan Commission asked for, but I think that between the traffic impact analysis and cutting off those 2 northern lots, that has me concerned. And I think that we need to that it's worth spending a couple of more months to let them get the information that would be very helpful in answering those questions.
Nancy?
My motion would be to amend the motion, or not my motion, but the thought would be to amend the motion to lay it over until such time as the traffic impact study has been done. So I will amend my motion.
No, you can't do that.
Okay.
Let me just ask you this, Nancy. If a traffic study is what we're all waiting for, doesn't the traffic study have to be premised on something, i.e. a preliminary plat?
That's correct, and that's what they would use to determine their interior traffic counts, and yes.
Well, you have to have a starting point somewhere.
Well, they would have the starting point. They can use this as a starting point. And
Well,
if
then-
it comes back that the traffic impact analysis says they have the proper amount of accesses in the right places and they have the proper dimensioning for them, then their preliminary plat would be very viable at that point.
Then what is the point of laying it over if they need something to start with? And
The traffic impact analysis doesn't, well, the plat doesn't have to be approved for the analysis to be done. And in fact, in my experience having to do traffic impact studies, we've had to do them at preliminary plat to make sure the preliminary plat is viable.
And you also,
Mr. President?
Nancy, I think you also mentioned that you didn't think this preliminary plat was complete. That there were still things that should have been in it that weren't, because they didn't have the time to complete it.
Well, those things are part of the preliminary plat application criteria, meaning the restrictive covenants, meaning the deed restrictions and so forth. Those are things that I'm not too worried about, only because they made the promise on public record. The Plan Commission's recommendation to the board, as well as any approvals of this preliminary plat, are subject to those conditions. So by final plat, they have to have the deed restrictions in place and written properly. The ones that they provided to us at preliminary plat, I made clear and outlined, hence the changes that are coming, about the things that we want to see in those documents, about the way the ownership of the outlots should be handled, and about the way the maintenance of the properties, as well as was stated in the developer's presentation, they are adding exterior maintenance to those restrictive covenants for assessment, monthly or yearly assessment requirements. That was my main concern over the use, was that if they are gonna be rental properties and they have an HOA, that and there are 2 units on a property, I needed to be clear about how ownership would be handled on those, and in the long term, how maintenance would be handled on those. So under the code, under RL1, and, I had Sam explain this at the Plan Commission meeting. And maybe I should go ahead and let him re-explain it so that I don't mess it up. Under the RL1, we talked about the fact that I could build on the lots that are zoned RL1 that the developer is not restricting to 1 unit. I could build a 2-unit property, a side-by-side property. I could live in one and I could rent out the other. My question was, what happens if I decide I don't like being a landlord, I want to sell the 2nd unit? I want to sell it off. Now what has to happen in order for that to happen, Sam?
In that circumstance, they would either need to apply to divide the property, if it were able. It would depend on the unit on that property if it were divisible or not. Or they could apply for a condominium plat, to condo plat and sell off the individual units where that lot's land would be under common ownership. Either way, the land division or the condominium plat would have to come back to the Plan Commission and Village Board for approval.
So understand that under the code, and this is really important, this to me is really important because it's very hard to understand. Under the, in the way that the developer is developing this with the individual lots and not putting a condominium plat and declaration over it, in order for a 2nd unit on an individual lot to be sold off, there is further action. So this tells me that this developer wants to keep this project, because otherwise they can't keep 1 unit and sell the other. It just gets kind of, it's complicated, but they are going to have to hold to what they're bringing us. So I have said to them all along, through the microphone that I'm speaking to you on, they have an amazing opportunity here in a residential subdivision to, as a for sale project. If they choose not to do that, we can't stop them. I think it's underestimating our market. They keep telling us they know our market. I don't think they do. And so in any event, as I said, I would love to see what this plat is going to look like after the TIA and make sure that all the accesses we're showing on here are in the right place and that the deed restrictions can be rewritten and presented to us as well while that's going on.
Okay, just a reminder of the board, the motion that trustee Washburn made was to approve the preliminary plat. I just want to bring us back to where we're at that way. And go ahead.
Well, to get to the traffic impact analysis, one of the conditions that were in here that were included when you made the motion, subject to these conditions, one of them is following approval of the preliminary plat and prior to approval of the final plat, the applicant shall conduct a traffic impact analysis and modify the proposed roadway and related civil plans per any recommendations from that impact analysis. So I don't really understand the need to lay this over if they're going to be required to do the traffic impact analysis before the final plat is approved anyway.
Question to Attorney Smith. You see the look you're giving me right now. So again, it goes back to substantial change. In the event we approve this preliminary plat, and Denise is right, it does have that condition listed on there. I'm trying to move the condition up to preliminary plat. Let's say that we approve the preliminary plat tonight and the final, and the TIA is done, and the TIA says they should only have 1 access. The TIA says they should have all 5 accesses, whatever. Whatever the TIA says, at what point does it make a substantial enough change that the preliminary plat has to come back to us for, or the Plan Commission and Board for re-review based on those conditions?
I think because it's a condition, it doesn't matter, because you're making the preliminary plat contingent on any modifications recommended in the TIA. And so, in other words, they must get a TIA. If they don't, the preliminary plat approval is void, and they must make modifications as recommended in the TIA, or the preliminary plat approval is void. That's the way I look at it.
Mr. President, could we ask Sam for he might have any input on this?
Did you want to just maybe read through the list of conditions?
Sure. Number 1, the applicant shall clarify which lots it plans to restrict to detached houses by modification to the preliminary plat or subject homeowners association documents. Number 2, the applicant shall modify the homeowners association documents to denote that all of the common areas or facilities within the land division will be held in common ownership as undivided proportionate interests by the members of the homeowners association per section 74-2.6. Number 3, the applicant shall modify the preliminary plat to extend Providence Drive southwards to connect to Braun Road, eliminating lots 103 and 104. Number 4, following approval of the preliminary plat and prior to approval of the final plat, stormwater and sedimentation control plans and specifications shall be submitted for review and approval in accordance with the Village Stormwater Management and Erosion and Sedimentation Control Ordinance per section 74-4.6. Per the recommendations in the Pike River Watershed Plan, these stormwater management and erosion and sedimentation controls should include native landscaping, restore wetlands where possible, and include naturalized stormwater detention facilities. Condition 5, the applicant shall modify the plat to connect the public walkway shown between lots 82 and 83. I'm going to take a pause there. I actually met with the landowners of the adjacent property where that would connect through. And they intend to petition the village to discontinue the walkway on their side. So I would ask that that condition number 5 be subject to, if the homeowners do not petition the village to discontinue the public walkway. Number 6, the subdivider shall update the plat to include vision 20-foot triangles at the corner of lots adjacent to roadway intersections per 74-7.9D. Number 7, the applicant shall update the on-site civil engineering infrastructure plans to show the installation of a public street lamp at the corner of street intersections per 74-8.13. Number 8, the subdivider shall update the on-site civil engineering infrastructure plans to show planted trees. The total number of trees shall be planted shall be based on 1 tree for every 50 feet of frontage on all streets proposed to be dedicated and spaced on average about 50 feet apart. The required tree shall be planted in the area between the sidewalk and curb in accordance with plans and specifications approved by the Public Works Director per section 74-8.15A. And number 9, following approval of the preliminary plat and prior to approval of the final plat, the applicant shall conduct a traffic impact analysis by a licensed traffic engineer and modify the proposed roadway and related civil plans per any recommendations from the TIA per section 90-420.130 sub A sub 1.
Thank you, Sam. So if I could just wrap this up, the main concerns again are density related and traffic related. In terms of density, I think that the developer has made his best efforts at reducing density, maybe not to all your liking, but at least to within where this is being zoned at. I think he's trying to be responsible that way. And in terms of traffic, I know all of you are really interested in where this traffic study goes. I am too. And I think that, that is something that we'll all look forward to analyzing it when it comes back and making whatever appropriate changes we need to make. Traffic analysis is something that I've always been interested in. I remember as a boy growing up in the city of Racine, I tried to do whatever I could to impact traffic. I'd climb on my Stingray when I'd see these rubber hoses going across the street and drive over it about 50 times to lend my impact. And then for good measure, I'd get off my bike and stomp on it a couple of times, too. So the number that ended up getting analyzed was probably some oddball number, and the analyzer was probably thinking, is unicycles driving across this, or what's going on?
No wonder their roads are all messed up.
So I'm not going to say what road it was, but if the traffic is screwed up on a certain road in the city of Racine, it's probably my fault. So regarding the preliminary plat, roll call.
Karis.
Nay.
Anastasio.
Aye.
Doxy.
Nay.
Venturini.
Aye.
Washburn.
Nay.
DeGroot.
Aye.
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
Mr. President, can I make another motion, Chris?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to lay over the sanctuary at Pike River preliminary plat, PSP 25-1, as presented with the conditions as read by Sam Schultz until such time as the traffic impact study has been completed and been able to be addressed on the plat, preliminary plat.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and second. Any further discussion, or is the board okay with that?
So I do have a question, and that was until the traffic was completed?
The
'Cause
traffic
was it-
study's
What was
complete.
the study? How long was the study?
Probably a few months, it would be my guess.
And it hasn't started as of yet?
Correct. Yeah, so they'll need to get a traffic engineer, hire them, give them the data. The traffic engineer, as previously said, will go out, do traffic counts during the day, run it through their models, which are governed by DOT standards, and then they spit out a report that says, here's the level of service, based on the feedback today. We'll also direct them to include in the scope, the pedestrian movements throughout the subdivision as well, because that came up as a concern during public comment. So I'd guess at a minimum 3 months, depending on, there's not that many licensed traffic engineers in southeast Wisconsin, so kind of depends on their workload and who they can get out there, sooner rather than later.
So I don't know how you work this, but could you put it on to where we could address this at our next CO, the pre-meeting, to discuss the potential with the changes, but not lengthen it out more than 3 months, because there might be things that still could be addressed, but to lengthen it out to that extreme without getting an opportunity to look at it and talk.
How does the lawyer answer that?
Well, the motion before the board is to lay it over until the TIA is completed. And what else did you add to that, Nancy?
Till the traffic impact analysis has been completed and been able to be
Incorporated?
incorporated into
Yeah.
the preliminary plat.
So I
Any
think-
changes into the preliminary plat.
I think the motion that you must vote on is that. So basically, speaking practically here, how it would work is the TIA gets done, the recommendations are incorporated to the preliminary plat application, and the application is made, and then you get it whenever it is done. That's how it would work for this motion.
I'll simply just add that I feel it's basically, we're doing the same thing based off the council's advice that the preliminary plat would have been null and void if they didn't do the TIA, but I'm fine with this new motion.
Okay, let's roll call that then.
Karis.
Aye.
Anastasio.
Aye.
Doxy.
Aye.
Venturini.
Aye.
Washburn.
Aye.
DeGroot.
Aye, motion carries. So that is laid over then until until we get the traffic study.
Yeah, you know, for a residential, this isn't a DOT project. Those can take a long time. I think it can be done in a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, need one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for